All right, today on Musicians Edition, we're going to talk about counting in 3/4 and in 6/8, and take a look at a few different rhythms and how we can divide the measure up into different divisions. Okay. So first, if you remember kind of the little rhythm tree that we set up, or talked about different ways to divide a beat, or different ways to divide whole notes, different ways to divide single beats, right, into half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. The same is going to apply here in 3/4. So when we think about time signatures, what we want to think about is the top number telling us how many beats are in one measure, and the bottom number telling us what type of note we're counting by, right? So in 3/4, there are 3 beats in a measure, and we're going to count by the quarter note, right? That's what the 4 tells us, right? So there are 3 quarter notes in every measure, right? Or a quarter note gets 1 beat in 3/4, okay? So if we think about it, we'll start with quarter notes, right? We can get 1, 2, 3 quarter notes into a measure, right? If we start to divide that, right, we can get 2 eighth notes here. We can get 2 eighth notes from every quarter note, right, or 2 eighth notes in every beat. So that's going to give us 6 total eighth notes that we can fit into one measure. So we label each of the quarter notes 1, and then 2, and then 3, right? 1 beat, second beat, third beat, right? First beat, second beat, third beat, okay? So then the way we count the eighth notes are still 1, and then and in between. If you remember what we did on that rhythm tree before, right? It's the eighth notes get the number plus an and, right? So beat 2 is going to be 2 and. Beat 3 is going to be 3 and. Okay? Now if we think about dividing this into another step further, right, we can get 2 16th notes from every eighth note. Right? So that would give me 1. And if you remember how we fill in between, right, the halfway point through the beat is still and then we put E and in between. 1 E and right? We'd have the same thing on beat 2. 2 E and 3 E and Okay, so that would give me a whole measure worth of 16th notes. Okay, so we get 1, 2, 3, or if we double that pace, 1 and 2 and 3 and, right? Or if we double that pace, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and Okay, and you can see the tempo is the same between those, but the 3 of them, just the rate at which the notes are going by doubles as we increase the number of notes, right? Or as we decrease the value of the notes. Now we think about lengthening these notes. The one note that would take up a whole measure in 3/4 is going to be a dotted half note, right? Now when we put a dot on a note, it means we're going to increase the value of the note by half of its original value, okay? So a half note, if you remember what we talked about before, a half note gets 2 beats. So if we add a dot to a half note, we're going to take half of the original value and add it onto that note, right? So half of 2 is 1. We're going to add 1 to the original 2, and that gives us 3 total beats, right? So a dotted half note in 3/4 lasts an entire measure. All right, now we're going to look at a different time signature, which is 6/8. All right, so in 6/8, remember what we talked about with our time signatures. 6/8 means I have 6 beats in every measure, right? And then the 8 tells me that we're counting by the eighth note, right? So before this point, quarter notes have always gotten their own number, right? Or a quarter note is 1 beat, right? Now that we've changed the bottom number in our time signature, we're counting by the eighth note instead of the quarter note. So every eighth note is going to get its own number, okay? That can be a little confusing sometimes because we're so used to counting eighth notes with 1 and 2 and, right? But now we have to switch gears a little bit and think about each eighth note getting its own number, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and put my 6 eighth notes in this measure, right? And you'll also notice I'm grouping them in groups of 3, right? Which is a little bit different from what we were doing in 3-4, where we were grouping them in groups of 2. Okay, now if we start combining these notes or dissecting these notes, let's see how that kind of shapes up a little bit, right? So if we think about 3/8 notes, right? If we wanted to combine all 3 of those 1/8 notes into one single note, it would have to be a dotted quarter note, right? Remember we talked about a dot adds half of the original value, right? And then we think back to the rhythm tree, that chart that we put up a while back. We remember that 1/8 note or 1 quarter note. Remember that 1 quarter note divides into 2 equal 1/8 notes, right? So if we put a dot on a quarter note, that's going to increase its value by half of the original value. So half of a quarter note is 1 single 1/8 note. If we add that to the original quarter note, then we end up with 3 total 1/8 notes, or 1.5 beats worth of time, right? So in 6/8, we can use that dotted quarter note to encompass all 3 of these 1/8 notes, right? Or the first 3 beats of the measure. Same thing for the second half of the measure, right? Okay, so now remember we're counting by the 1/8 note. So if we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we get one number for each 1/8 note, right? Now we think about where this dotted quarter note lines up. This is beat 1, and then we hold for beat 2 and beat 3, and then this dotted quarter note is on beat 4, and then we would hold for beat 5 and beat 6. If we start splitting some of these in half, this is where it can get confusing when we start using 16th notes in 6/8, right? If we split some of these 1/8 notes in half, remember an 1/8 note splits into 2 16th notes, right? But at this point, we're dividing 1 beat into 2 equal parts, right? So this is going to be 1. And then just like when we divided quarter notes into 1/8 notes in 3/4, right? We're going to divide this 1/8 note, which is a whole beat, into 2 equal 16th notes, right? So we're dividing 1 beat into 2 equal parts. We're going to use 1 and, okay? Same thing on beat 2. It would be 2 and, right? And so on. It could be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and. All right, now let's practice a couple of rhythms in 6/8 that will hopefully start to bring a little bit of this together, okay? So I'm going to put a dotted quarter note on beat 1, and then I'm going to put 3 1/8 notes after that. Right, so let's think back to the chart we just had. We know this is going to be 3 beats worth of time, right? So this is going to be beat 1, and then also beat 2, and beat 3, right? We're going to hold through beat 2 and beat 3. This is going to line up on beat 4, 5, 6. Okay? So this rhythm would be 1, 4, 5, 6. Okay? If we took that same rhythm, turned it around, this would be 1, 2, 3, and then this would be 4, hold through 5 and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? Okay. Now let's use some regular quarter notes without the dot, right? So we remember from our chart way back that 1 single quarter note is worth 2 1/8 notes of time, right? So if we have 1 quarter note here in 6/8, it's going to get 2 1/8 notes worth of time. In 6/8, each 1/8 note gets its own beat, right? So this is going to be 2 beats worth of time in 6/8, right? So this is going to be beat 1 and also beat 2, right? Now remember, a single 1/8 note is going to get 1 beat, right? So that's going to be beat 3, right? And then I'm going to do the same rhythm on the second half of the measure as on the first half of the measure, right? And this is a very common rhythm in 6/8, right? So this is beat 1, hold through 2. This is beat 3. This is going to be 4. We're going to hold through 5, and this is going to be beat 6. Okay, so this would be 1, 3, 4, 6. Now, let's start using some 16th notes in 6/8. Okay, so just like we group the 8th notes in 3 beats, we also group the 16th notes in 3 beats, right? So 3 total beats is going to give us 6 16th notes, right? So we're going to group all of those together, right? Now remember how we count 16th notes in 6/8, right? 1 and 2 and so on. So this is going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5, 6. Okay, and then what that's going to translate to when we perform this rhythm is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5, 6, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5, 6. All right, let's do a couple more. So if we put 2 16ths followed by 2 8ths, beam that all together because that's 3 total beats, right? This is going to be 1 and this is going to be beat 2, and this is going to be beat 3. 1 and 2, 3. 1 and 2, 3. Let's move the 16th notes to the middle of the 3 beats, right? To beat 2. And this is a very common rhythm in 6/8. So this is beat 1, this is beat 2. The 16th note on the second half of beat 2 is and this is 3, right? 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. If we did the same thing on the second half of the measure, then this is beat 4, this is 5, and this is 6. So we end up with 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so hopefully that's helpful in counting different rhythms in 6/8. Next time, we're going to talk about the differences between 3/4 and 6/8. Why would you use one versus the other? Why do we have both? And what does each time signature do for us rhythmically that makes the music interesting? Okay, so I'll see you then.